Sanguine plague. A curious quality had captured Bailey. The notion of something otherwise unseen that now made itself known. But what was it? She stood with one hand over the hilt of her silver sword. Not imposingly, only casual. She had watched a man make his way up the stairs to the upper streets of Cathedral Ward. He had walked strangely. Or had he not? There was always the thought that perhaps the scourge would sink its fangs into the holy ward that had remained mostly untarnished. But one would be naive as to think it was impossible. And Bailey was not naive. Was there something wrong with him? He had indeed been out of the ordinary. Not as leering and reserved as most Yarnamites. Outgoing and polite, he had greeted her with the respect most holy blades are greeted with. But she had noticed a twitch in the corner of his mouth, a restraining on himself, on his true form. She decided to follow him up the stairs. If this was the first open incident in the Cathedral Ward, her insight could now prevent it. Up the stairs where the edges were lined with praying statues, she ascended just in time to see him turn down onto a side street to the right. The narrow path lay with its right side, adorned with a metal fence, facing the rest of the sloping town. It was an elevated path, and down below it was the roof of houses, and above to its left was another masoned elevation, on which stood more houses. She thought it a bit strange that he would walk this solitary path, out of local eye. Perhaps he lived along it, or not. She noticed her heart beating heavy. Her gut screamed something was deeply wrong with the fellow. The sun, as it was setting, cast its rays onto her as she walked along the side path after him. He had not taken visible notice of her discreet pursuit. The street sloped downward and turned slightly left, out of the sun's grace and into the mysterious shadows. It merged with another road. The man stopped to converse with someone along the way. A woman, dressed very finely and hair tied up in a beehive hairdo. Bailey immediately reacted to him laying a hand on the woman's shoulder and shaking it. A sign of aggression. Now her breath was loud, and she felt like she was burning with anticipation. The two of them simply talked, but unlike the woman, the man was very articulate. He moved his hands wildly as he spoke. What forces did he hold? Was there truly humanity within him? Bailey saw the woman giving a quick glance her way, then back at the man. Was there fear in her eyes? Did she even know him? Bailey approached.
Evening.
They both grew more stiff and attentive at the interaction from an esteemed hunter. Evening, madam. The man greeted her back, and the woman nodded.
Night will soon be upon us. I hope you need not travel far from your homesteads.
She shot two separately but equally inquisitive looks at both of them. None appeared particularly bothered by her observation. "Oh, good hunter. You keep the cathedral ward so exceptionally that we need not concern ourselves." Other than the statement sounding very hollow, she thought it strange. Did he mean to insinuate something? Even though she did not pick up anything concrete that would indicate falsity, her instincts told her this man was not to be trusted. That if she did not do something now, perhaps the woman would fall victim to the beast within.
You should be on your way, ma'am. I'll take it from here. Pardon?
The woman looked confused, as did the man. Bailey could feel an anxiety rise and her blood pump faster.
I'll need you to come with me, sir.
Sorry?
The church would want to examine you. It's just procedure. Oh, but good hunter,
the woman pleadingly began.
He show no signs. He's oh so calm and polite, always. That might be, but the signs are strange. Please cooperate, for both our safety.
Bailey felt a sudden and violent itch in her eyes, and on reflex, her arm shot up to relieve the urge. When she removed her hand, both of them looked upon her with horror.
Just come along now.
It was now a struggle to sound calm.
Are you all right? That looks rather nasty.
The woman pointed out with a shaky voice.
What do you mean? I'm fine. It's him you should worry about.
Then it dawned on her. She had walked right into their trap. It had snuck up on her. Their fiendish machinations. The night had already fallen. How had they possibly? No, it was not the color of night surrounding them. It was red streaks of light shining down upon them. The clouds had taken on violet shades, and when she looked to the right, where the other two had already averted their attention, she saw a brilliantly red moon. The beasts wearing men's clothing. Now they were everywhere, trying to sway her into being an outsider. Clever, very clever indeed. With her guard dropped, they had a good chance of taking her. The scream of an infant provoked her to draw her blade, and she staggered back in fright. But she felt dizzy and weary, her vision blurred. A dot over her sight started to form and grow over what she saw. A splitting headache came over her.
What is this?
Something erupted in her stomach and shot out with a wet and loud crunch. Through her mouth, arms, legs and chest. She saw blood spray around her, and she looked down from high onto the two figures. There was an inquisitive thought in her head of what had happened. Then she remembered the hatred, and unquenching thirst, and looked up to scream at the moon.
You are awfully quiet today, Ludwig. Not that I mind.
Gratia commented, leaning back with her feet on the table. Ludwig sat leaned forward with his chin resting against his hands, elbow on the table. He had always thought a holy blade could make more effort in her conduct, but had no intention of chastising her for it. Despite the title, Gratia was quite the exception.
But, you know, you are informed to hunt, at least.
Always.
Then stop thinking so much. I can tell you are thinking on something.
Of course. You seldom think yourself. She laughed just like a bellowing man, albeit in a slightly higher tone.
Suppose you're right.
Gratia?
Hmm?
Do you think I am a poor example? A poor leader? She scratched her head.
Weird question. What are you getting at?
Perhaps my ways are too extreme. I just... Well, it recently became known to me it might not be healthy. For my own part, that is.
Well, you have to put your whole back into it if you want to be healthy on a hunt, eh?
Yes, yes. But also to keep your virtues intact. They are diligent hunters. But perhaps they want to live up to my image more so than what is good for them.
What? No way. Or, I guess. I mean, sure. No one hunts as ferociously as Ludwig, the Holy Blade.
Quite.
Sure, they want to be as their captain. But you can't stop them from doing what they do.
As a leader, one always can, in a way.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I just hunt. That is fine.
The young hunter Alfred came charging in, looking frantically around as if hunted by every beast in Yarnam.
Captain! Beasts! Beasts in Cathedral Ward! All must come now!
Ludwig catapulted himself out of the chair, towards the doorway, swiping up his sword on the way. Gratia stood so violently that her chair was tossed aside.
Alert every hunter, Alfred, then join us.
The two left him behind and rushed down over the bridge, away from the workshop. With a quick look he searched over the city, that seemed as it mostly was. Although everything seemed normal, and he could not see evidence of the occurrence Alfred talked about. He might have missed it. For above him swirled dark violet clouds, and a sinister red moon bathing the town in crimson hues. That completely stole his focus. The two of them stood and gawked at the phenomena, but equally as quickly resumed sprinting upon hearing a loud and echoing inhuman shriek. Upon emerging from the Elden chapel, they saw Simon shooting his arrows up the stairs towards the cathedral ascent. Looking in the direction, he saw one of the larger beasts he had ever seen, and right when he needed to, leaping in the air, the beast was about to come crashing down at Simon, who leapt into a roll out of the impact. Ludwig and Gratia stepped backwards. She was first to attack as she jumped towards the head of the thing with a mighty blow from her iron fists. The beast screeched in an agonizing volume and backed away from her assault. She lunged after and tackled towards its lower leg and began to bash at its kneecap. Unswayed, the beast swiped at its feet with its gargantuan hand. She was tossed aside, and Ludwig lunged in with a slice of his sword at the exposed leg as it turned after Gratia. The large monstrosity jumped to the right, away from where Gratia had regained her footing, and from where Simon was continuously sending arrows its way. Ludwig jumped at the beast and swung his blade so it hit the backside of the leg. The beast stumbled forward and made a mad rush straight ahead, charging its weirdly curving horns into the opposite building. Both Gratia and Simon had to toss themselves out of its way. It bashed its hideous fists in the ground and spun around, sweeping its long arm on the ground. Gratia leapt in towards its side and bashed at the ribs. Ludwig came running, and as he did, the beast reacted to the heavy strikes and moved out of their reach. Then came the arrow that seemed to hit square in the eye. It began to toss its head back and scream. All three started attacking the legs. It toppled backwards, lacking support to stand. Simon rushed over to its head. From where Ludwig stood, he could only see how the lying body thrashed around, then grew still and limp as the roars faded. Simon came back around the terrifying mass. Blood splattered over his clothes and specks on his face. He appeared traumatized and heaved his breath.
He just turned.
Who?
I can't recall his name, but he came out from the chapel and stood with me, watching the...
He leaned over to rest his arms on his knees, then gestured up towards the looming moon.
We heard a roar in the distance, and Alfred came running, hollering about beasts. The man leaned over like sick. Then he just exploded.
How? Who was he, Simon? He looked as if offended.
I don't know. Just one of the holy blades.
Alfred came running behind him and stood there, exhausted from sprinting all over the shop. Ludwig looked at him, then back at the vacant chapel.
Where are the rest?
Alfred only shook his head. Suddenly their attention was drawn by seeing how something started to happen with the clouds. As if the gods intervened, the clouds started to part by a veil of water as seen from below, moving over the sky. It washed away the clouds, dissolving them in the current, and the moon as well started to disappear. They were left with a normal dusk, but as the sounds would tell, was not left short of beasts.
To the church! All to the cathedral!
In the wake of a vanished red moon, it was little use to shout in the midst of the panicked citizens and the ear-shattering screams of the beasts. Gascoigne instead gave all his attention to the fiend, making it focus on someone that was dreaming instead of those that would never return. An overgrown fist came slamming down at him. He evaded, and the creature continued to frenziedly pummel the place he had once stood, with disregard of his absence.
Henrik!
He looked to see the old hunter in the process of sending a fleeing group of people out through the gate of the round plaza. As soon as they had all left, he came running towards him.
Are there more?
At them came the beast's hand, dragged along the ground with a deafening grinding noise. The claws came shooting up at them, traveling high up in the air. They both stepped back.
Hope not.
Henrik shouted and ran to flank the beast's right. He started to throw lacerated knives in its direction as he ran. It caught the beast's attention, and Gascoigne took the opportunity. He tore his axe, extending the hilt, and attacked the back of the beast with a jump. Blood poured, and he tugged the axe towards him, ripping the flesh as he retrieved it. In the corner of his eye, he saw Henrik slashing on the freakish arm. The beast swiped him away and turned its whole body to bite at Henrik. He jumped away into a roll, which Gascoigne utilized to his advantage by aiming a powerful, full-body swing with a long hilted axe, passing it over Henrik as he rolled under and clashing square into the open beast's maw. Out of shock, or sheer force, the beast tumbled onto its back. It slowly raised itself and Henrik came up to his side. Its jaw had been completely detached, sent flying by the cut. Its terrible howl now sounding even more grotesque. Suddenly, and apparently quick enough for the furious beast not to take notice, a streak of blackness darted right past it. A trace of blood followed after the passing of what could have been a large bird. It felt at its ribcage, where a large gash had now been made, pouring with blood. Having landed from the maneuver, the dark hunter of hunters stood up with her blade stained red. From the direction she had entered, now came a second screeching howl, followed by the furious appearance of a second great horned beast. She turned her beak to Gascoigne.
The clerics are turning. This is the hunt we've dreamed of.
He looked at Henrik, who grunted, like they were a bunch of amateurs. Then he hurled, unperceivably fast, 2 knives the beast's way. Gascoigne pushed together the axe and grabbed his pistol in his left hand. The black huntress raised her solitary blade and pulled it apart into 2 as she joined in their assault. The beast that had pursued the woman was in a more fit condition than the other, and having seen how Henrik had targeted the original beast, he aimed his pistol for the second one's head. Right next to him came the black crow, and he fired in its direction, while she leapt to the left, directly into its side. The monstrous arm came slamming down upon him. He rolled out of the way, and from his knees after exiting the roll, fired again at the beast's head. He cocked the barrel open with a loud clang, and inserted another round as he stood up. He could see flashes of white from the glistening blades of the huntress, as she was quickly slashing the beast open from the side. Naturally, they were sturdier than that, and it responded by jumping several feet into the air, forcing her to sprint away as it landed, punching at the ground. Little off to the side, Henrik was in the process of keeping the somewhat slower, jawless beast occupied. Even though he knew the old hunter's mastery, he kept a warding eye his way. His own prey, now standing back up from having landed after the jump, was attacked by a series of slashes with his axe. Just as the bloody muzzle turned his way, he leapt back while firing his pistol. As he reloaded, he was distracted by his father-in-law being clawed by the beast. He staggered backwards, and Gascoigne was about to run to his aid, but had to evade the incoming screaming maw of the beast. However, just when he saw the beast dragging its fist along the ground to tear into Henrik, Eileen darted straight at him and shoved him aside. He saw the hunter of hunters being tossed by the immense force, flying limply in the air and landing hard on the roofs, like a piece of tattered cloth, laying still and dead. In the same instance, Henrik had managed to step to the side and had just consumed a blood vial, which returned the energy to his posture. Relieved, Gascoigne turned his attention to the beast in front of him, who struck down its enormous fist at him. He stepped under it, towards its body, cutting with the axe into the beast's ankle. As it stumbled slightly, he stepped out from under it, positioning himself right in front of it, spun around and plunged the axe into the beast's inner fur-shrouded lower arm, screaming as he did so. While he dragged the axe forward to tear open the skin, he drew out the long hilt and made a full spin with his body, swinging the axe around him with both hands and hitting the beast right in the side of its head, below the horns. He thought to have seen an eye being popped out of its socket as the axe sunk deep. The beast roared loudly and stood up high. The axe had embedded itself deep enough so it was jerked out of its grip, and he moved away. One arm attempted to scratch away the defect. An arrow suddenly appeared within the exposed chest, and the beast was stunned by its impact, followed by a second and a third in quick succession. He turned to their origin point and saw Simon, still down on his knee, taking aim while the captain and the massive Gratia rushed towards him. When he saw them slowing down, he turned back to the beast and found that the arrows had already done the job and the beast fell backwards. Having dealt with the former beast, Hemwick emerged on the other side of the carcass, and Gascoigne moved to retrieve his weapon.
"Are there more?"
He heard Ludwig ask as he twisted it free. Hemwick grunted and nodded.
"Where are the people?"
Some fled towards Central, others gathered in the cathedral. Gascoigne came up, with the axe leaving a dripping trail. From the same direction the three had just arrived, coming from Elden Chapel, Eileen emerged. At first in a sprint, then slowed to a silent walk as she saw the battle finished. She nodded at Hemwick, who nodded back as she came up to join them.
"Let's get to it then,"
Gratia said.
"There are beasts on the prowl."
After they had slain another roaming, towering beast appearing between the houses, Ludwig had wordlessly sprinted down the direction it had appeared in. If the others remained behind or spread out in their own directions, Eileen did not know, for she ran directly after Ludwig as soon as she saw him leave. He was quick, running ahead with his sword drawn, as if he had somewhere he intended to be. When the muzzle of one of the night's cleric beasts suddenly appeared around the street corner, it was as if it had been calling for him, for Ludwig was not startled, but ran straight past while slashing with the sword at the ankle. The beast did not seem to have realized what happened, only roared out and stepped back slightly. Ludwig instantly turned and leapt back at the beast. It bashed with a fist at him that he avoided with uncanny reflexes, then immediately pierced straight down into its hand. He fought like possessed, but everything seemed to wash off him, like cold water being poured over him when he saw her approaching. He stepped back from the beast, while she darted in between its legs, where she pierced the blade of mercy straight into its left leg, and with both hands tore it through the flesh. She ripped out a sizable chunk, and just as she flew away from beneath the howling beast, Ludwig had spun around, his blade flashing with a very brief line of moonlight right at the edge, before clashing into the leg, cutting clean through the thick bone. It fell abruptly forward, and while Ludwig ran around to the head, Eileen leapt up and ran over its back, separated the blade and plunged them into the back of its neck, while Ludwig pierced the sword into its right eye. The beast sucked in great amounts of air and shrieked, feebly trying to lift its arm before, with a crash, landing entirely in the ground. Eileen braced herself by grabbing at the horns as it came to rest, and searched for Ludwig's eyes, but he had already taken off in search of a new prey.
"Ludwig, wait."
She jumped off and ran up to him. He stopped looking around maniacally and focused on her, almost as if astonished.
"Are you so used to hunting alone?
She said a bit teasingly. He briefly smiled, then continued to worriedly look around.
We need to find all the hunters. Rally to the round plaza. They need us. No lone hunter can survive this bestial tide.
He started walking in a direction he likely picked at random.
Ludwig.
She stepped after him and took his hand. He continued to walk, making her lose her grip, but he regardless stopped and turned, looking very determined, but also frantic, panicked and worried. He had always been so stoic, so brave and courageous in her eyes. Had that same underlying fear always been there, she thought? Or had it only appeared recently?
You don't...
She bit her lip beneath the mask. He started growing anxious again, and his attention was wavering.
I won't die, Ludwig.
She stepped after him, and his eyes locked onto her again.
There's a hunter's dream that saves me. But I don't know if it will save you too. So, please.
He briefly narrowed his eyes, puzzled. It suddenly struck her how foolish it was to convince Ludwig, the Holy Blade, not to hunt.
I know you want to do right by your hunters, but let me take care of them like it should be. It won't matter if they kill me, time and time again. I'll give them all mercy. I'll die for them. For you, Ludwig.
The corner of his mouth twitched into a smile.
What was it, Eileen? We all come to a dream in the end.
He straightened his back, took a deep breath, and reached out a hand to her.
Let's hunt together then. For mercy. Only tonight. The Holy Blades need you to save them before the beasts overwhelm them.
It felt heavy to speak, or to move for that matter, but she managed to nod. Once he started to move away, she hurried after him, and they walked side by side down the street on a night filled by terrible roars of the most horrible beasts. Simon ran back to Elden Chapel. He realized that there were now few reliable hunters left in Yharnam. but some aid must be had from the upper ward. He flew down the steps to the little graveyard, and upon entering Elden Chapel, found it very different from before. Disheveled townspeople had taken shelter there from the abrupt hunt. He was about to simply head into the workshop when he spotted Henriette among them, already coming his way. For some reason she was wearing a patchwork of thick brown cloth in favor of her usual stylish hunter attire.
Simon, what in the God's name is happening? This is it, I think. Beasts grow by the minute. All the hunters are gone. Heavens. Oh. From one nightmare to the next.
She said mostly to herself.
You could say that again. I fear that...
A terribly shrill roar overtook the tone of his voice, and everyone ducked from the sudden sound. He and Henriette darted towards the second entrance, out into the larger graveyard, where something frightfully lanky and tall was roaring at a hulking brute of a beast. Another massive creature, walking hunched on all four limbs, prowled at the incoming bipedal fiend. Then it lunged at it, and the two rolled around while tearing and biting into each other. He and Henriette threw themselves back around the corner of the door.
I must get these people out of here. It is too far to the Grand Cathedral. Through the aqueduct, then? I would guess Cathedral Ward is the least safe place on this night. Right then, come on.
She ran to the back of the chapel and opened the door.
Follow me. Simon, cover our backs.
He folded out his bow and drew an arrow while backing after the civilians, running after her through the door. Each of them crowded down a corridor into a study room where she opened up a latch in the floor and quickly descended. Simon remained by the door as they one by one descended after her, a small child having to be carried, which slowed the process. All the while, he nervously listened to the unending nightmare of roars, faintly coming from beyond. At last, he slid down the ladder himself, and they ran out into the old Prospector Memorial graveyard. Having run through it, and turning a corner with sight of one of the great bridges just down the street, they saw a completely white-furred creature engaged in combat with lesser creatures. Enveloped by a mane so grand it covered most of its back, running around the bridge with hunched posture, supported by a proportionately sized arm and one massively monstrous one. Horns appeared out from its face, obscuring its left eye, then proceeded to grow larger on top of its head, covering much of its left shoulder, and proceeded to extend further down its back, emerging from beneath the white mane. Unlike others, it did not have a muzzle, but a face leaning more to its former features, albeit deformed by massive teeth and sunken eyes. Simon had run up beside Henriette, and they both motioned for the people to stay behind the corner as they walked out on the walkway leading to the bridge, running below the foundation of Cathedral Ward. The pale beast was furiously attacking the size-wise smaller targets. Some appeared still very much human, wearing black or white church garbs, but all had long black hair, walked hunched, and had a slightly larger left arm. They assaulted it wielding various church weapons, but it was plain that the fully fledged beast's endurance and rage outmatched theirs, as it easily swept them away and jumped around over the bridge to avoid their manic and mindless onslaught. With one strike it threw off one of the man-beasts off the bridge. Simon looked at Henriette. He himself considered the pale beast an intimidating mark to fell alone, perhaps even with Henriette at his side. And since death was less preferable with the civilians behind them, he thought to utilize the chaos to their advantage. And judging by Henriette's nod, she thought the same. As they ran towards the bridge, Simon stopped to aim at the pale beast, firing an arrow that missed, as the thing was moving so frantically while dodging and thrashing at its opponents. Instead, he ran ahead and stopped just by the edge of the bridge, drawing an arrow, and waited while Henriette rushed straight at the creature being turned away. She slashed into its back and dodged away as it spun around, aimlessly swinging. Her presence quickly became the focus of a nearby hunter beast, clumsily wielding a kirkhammer in both hands. Simon fired the arrow as soon as it turned towards her, piercing through its left arm. The impact caused Henriette to take notice, and she slashed at it. Due to the arrow in its arm, it had problem retaliating and delivered a slow and clumsy swing that she simply ducked, stepped to the side and cut at its throat, almost severing the head. It fell dead, and she rapidly sheathed her blade and took the kirkhammer from it, once more turning at the beast. It had been busy maiming one of the fiends into a bloody pulp, and now, as she had a proper beast-slaying weapon of adequate proportions, she thrusted it forward at its hind legs, causing it to stumble and promptly leap into a roll away from her, roaring at her as it stood back up and slammed with its fists into the ground. Simon kept firing at any remaining beast, averting its furious attention from the pale beast onto her, allowing her to fully commit to the battle and execute an exquisite dodge to the side once it came leaping towards her so violently it tumbled along the ground afterwards. One of the lesser beasts finally took notice of Simon, and with a roar charged at him with a bloodied silver sword held aloft. With the bow he struck away the blade and proceeded ducking to the side while folding in the bow into the curved sword, slicing at the beast's legs. Has all hunter senses truly left you? The beast roared as it struck with the sword after him while turning. Then again, which Simon parried, which opened up the fiend for him to thrust the sword into the chest. It grunted and stiffened. He was quick to withdraw it and then slice its throat, letting it fall backwards. Then he turned and ran out further on the bridge, where one of the fiends was striking down at the pale beast, while Henriette attacked it from another angle. "Your left!" he shouted, knelt down and folded out the bow while drawing another arrow to aim at the fiend charging at her. She was able to step around the hammer she had struck into the ground to avoid the beast. There she picked it up and thrusted it at her attacker, shoving it backwards. She slung the hammer over her shoulder and drew her sheathed silver sword while lunging at it. The horizontal cut with the recently drawn sword missed, But in the same motion she turned her body to swing with the hammer held in only her left hand, which impacted with the beast. At that point, Simon fired the arrow that struck through its throat. If that didn't kill it, Henriette's second swing of the hammer, slamming it into the ground, did. He quickly drew a second arrow and fired at the pale beast that had turned, and the arrow entered into the upper back. It flinched and spotted him, opening its maw wide to roar his way. Henriette darted towards it, with the hammer over her shoulder and striking with the blade at the smaller right arm. It slammed down at her and jumped away. She staggered by the maneuver, and it was about to attack again, but it had leapt close to where Simon was coming from, and he started slashing at its legs. Several cuts were already visible, yet as was common with beasts, their rage endured a great amount of pain, if the sensation was at all known to them. He stepped to the side and started running out to Henriette, quickly transforming the bow to fire an arrow at the last remaining beast, then back into the blade with the intention of cutting at the pale beast. But he was so near to its massive arm that he was instead forced to throw himself into a dodge roll as it started to sweep wildly over the ground before jumping further back. Planting the hammer into the ground and bracing against it with her foot, she took out the sword and cut with both blades at the beast, staggered by the arrow, then thrusted with each into it, shoving its limp body to the ground afterwards. When he turned back to the last standing monstrosity, it leapt up high into the air, aiming a strike at him with a large fist. He dodged to the left, just in time for the fist to miss him, and for the beast's body to land right above him, where he now lay on the ground. Its head turned down, but was in the next moment assaulted by Henriette's blades, causing it to grunt ferociously while stepping back, allowing Simon the freedom to roll away from it. It turned its head up and roared at the sky. He came to his feet and followed Henriette, who had backed up to plunge her sword into the hammerhead, sheathing the second. It rushed towards them on the slender legs, while only using its right arm as a third leg. It braced against the ground and covered the remaining distance by leaping up at them. They stepped aside and turned to where it was rolling after it had landed, quickly standing up to face them. Simon started backing up to fire arrows, while Henriette advanced, stepping from side to side. When she got close, he fired an arrow, grazing against its face and lodging into its shoulder, making it flinch so fiercely she was able to land a massive uppercut with the hammer. It stood up on its hind legs, while taking 2 steps back, screaming. She drew her sheathed sword and stepped closer, slashing at its legs. It swept down at her with its arms, which tossed her to the side. Simon immediately fired an arrow that hit into the chest, then folded it into the blade while sprinting to it. It was about to turn to her, but had become distracted by the arrow, and by the time he got to it, he leapt to the side, spinning around and cutting at the exposed part of the leg. He felt the blade cut straight against bone, and the beast fell forward. Henriette stumbled to her feet and managed to jam a blood vial into her waist, which revitalized her. He ran over to her side. The beast turned and moved to the side along the edge of the bridge, glaring at them. The two of them took deep breaths while waiting for the beast to attack. When it lunged at them, it held out both its arms. Simon shot an arrow at its face, and while folding his bow, Henriette stepped forward and swung the hammer to the side, straight into the incoming left hand. He dodged away from the right hand as it swiped, but due to Henriette having swept away the second arm, it tumbled clumsily forward without its support and past them. Simon spun around as the beast crashed into a statue, landing on its side. There he rushed up to it and jammed the blade into the side of its face. The maw opened and the sunken eyes trembled with unending wrath, while a hissing scream left it. Just as he retrieved the blade, Henriette bashed its face with the hammer so mightily, the body rolled over the edge of the broken railing and down into the depths of the valley. They both peeked over the edge, without really being able to spot it. They stepped back and lightly ran back to the civilians.
You holding up? Fine. Odd choice of gob. I was occupied. I need to get these to safety. Know of Caddock? I'm not sure. He lives outside central Yarnam. I need to get there. Aren't you taking them home? On the night of the hunt? Sure. I'll help you. But I'll take the first lamp back to Cathedral Ward. We need your help too.
They stopped in front of the corner, and all the people emerged one by one, the fear on their faces slightly receding. But he could still tell that this would be a night they would never forget. Whatever it was that they had experienced, to give them such an imprint of dread.
It's that bad? It's only us. The other hunters. Well, I suppose you just saw them.